On today's episode of The Next, our guest is Andrew Lau, co-founder and CEO of Jellyfish. Jellyfish is a Boston software company that provides engineering leaders with data-driven insights to align their team's work with broader business objectives, enhancing visibility into engineering operations and productivity. Now, I first met Andrew, I think back in 2007, 2008, when I was just getting Runkeeper off the ground. So he's a fellow fogey founder like me, and he's in an interesting seat at Jellyfish in that he founded the company back in 2017. They've raised a boatload of venture. They did their Series C back in early 22, a 71 million round led by Excel with Insight Partners and Tiger Global. And they also are working with engineering organizations to help them run better and to help better map them to the business objectives of the company, which means that Andrew has a perspective of building a venture-backed company while also raising a family. He has the perspective of seeing how AI is transforming how startups get built and funded, because he's living that day to day. And he's also seeing how much it is or isn't infiltrating these large organizations that are customers of his as well. And his perspective is a really interesting one, where he's a bull long term, but in the short term, maybe there's some overhype and maybe people underestimate not just the technical implications and possibilities are one part, but then sometimes people underestimate how long things take to get adopted because of switching costs, behavior patterns, existing teams, existing processes, legacy infrastructure, technical debt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. At any rate, fascinating discussion. I learned a lot, and I hope you do as well. But before we get started, I'm Jason Jacobs, and this is The Next. It's not really a show, it's more of a learning journey to explore how founders can build ambitious companies while being present for family and not compromising flexibility and control, and also how emerging AI tools can assist with that. Each week, we bring on guests who are at the tip of the spear on redefining how ambitious companies get built, and selfishly, the goal is for this to help me better understand how to do that myself while bringing all of you along for the ride. Not sure where this is going to go, but it's going to be fun. Okay, Andrew Lau, welcome to the show.
Jason, wonderful to see you. I was actually counting the dates, and I think it's been like 15 years or something. I don't know. I'm making up numbers, but it's been a long while since I saw you. So this is great.
It has, yeah. It's unbelievable. We were just talking before we hit record, but it's just unbelievable how the years fly by. And my theory is that it's like a numerator and denominator thing. Like the 1 year unit stays constant, but the denominator gets bigger and bigger, meaning it's a smaller and smaller percentage of your life, which I think is why it makes it feel like the time goes faster over time.
Yeah, and I also would say the last 5 years have been so crisis to crisis that it has actually gone really fast and slow. Like in some ways, time has moved on really fast, but then you look back, you're like, whoa, because we're so in it all the time, just dealing with this issue or that issue, that's been fast forwarding on this. Anyways, wonderful to see you. Sorry it's been so long, but my memory is, I remember sitting down with you early mid Runkeeper journey, and you're like a recruiter, but you ran and you're doing this thing, and it was like the go just make consumer stuff and magic will happen days. And I don't know, I maybe rose-colored glasses, but those sound like the ideal times back in the day.
Yeah, no, that I used to be a pretty eager guy. It's like old bull, young bull. Now I'm still pretty ambitious, but I don't know if my tail is wagging quite as much as it once was.
Hey, I always say this to everyone, take the wins, man. So belated congrats on all the things you've done since we last talked. We clearly can't even hash it out in the quick before chat, nor even in this session around replaying all of it. But congrats, man. It's been cool watching you grow and change and evolve and do all the things.
Likewise. And that's a good segue, because I was about to congratulate you for what you built with Jellyfish. But what's Jellyfish?
Thanks, Jason. So Jellyfish now is actually an 8-year-old company. We help companies drive efficiency and productivity, but also help around software engineering teams. But really, it's about helping teams get unstuck, making sure they focus on the things they actually need to focus on to make the business succeed. I remember when we actually started the company, we made a trite, glib remark, which is we were trying to do the Salesforce for engineering. It's been 8 years, which is crazy. We have north of a couple hundred people on the team, 500 customers. And the best part for me is I got to found it and work with Dave and Phil, who I met 25 years ago, who hired me. And so it's
As an
been great to get
intern,
this
right?
journey.
Weren't you an intern to
Yeah.
start?
Yeah. It's tremendous to get a chance to go do that. And then actually, I'll say it for you, as we get older, as we get the chance to be intentional, as you clearly are on this endeavor, being thoughtful around why you do a thing and who you do it with and all these things are really important. And I got the chance in 16 to reconnect with these. We kept in touch socially, but to connect professionally and decide to do something together in 2017, which is a privilege to get to do that. But it's full of intention to want to go to battle with these guys, go to work with these guys, go to build with these guys. It's very lucky in that part. And we were conscious in doing that. So be intentional.
There's a few interesting threads which led me to reach out, Andrew. One is it's just that we're of a similar age, and I know you also are right in the thick of it with kids, and you're running a scaling startup with over 200 employees that's raised a bunch of venture, and yeah. So one part is I just want to know how that is, because that's
It's so easy, man. No.
Yeah, I can't imagine that right now. But then there's another piece, which is that you wrote a piece, I think it was for Fortune, just talking about from what I can gather from what you've said publicly, and we haven't talked a lot privately yet, which is why I wanted to have you on the show, but you're both bullish on the long term with AI, but also it seems like the data that you're seeing from the trenches is that in the short term, there's some overhype. And given that you have the data on how it's actually getting used in the field, I think that's an interesting thread. And then I think the last piece is just given that you're bullish long term and cautious short term, just how that manifests in terms of how much you turn up the crank in terms of how you're utilizing it internally and how it factors in your strategy. So we don't have to tackle all that right up front, but those are the reasons why I invited you on the show.
I'm down to cover all those things, and I'll let you lead the way because there's lots to talk about in all those dimensions, and I'll let you pace it around how you want to tackle these things.
For starters, just you founded the company in 16, your kids are a lot older now. Talk a bit about kind of the phase of life you're in then and the phase of life you're in now, and also just as the company's evolved, just what it's like to be a founder CEO navigating through all of that.
Yeah. Okay. My girls are 10 and 12 now. And so I guess we started 8 years ago. So they were 2 and 4, right, at that time. And maybe even when we started chatting with co-founders, like 1 and 3. Look, clearly really aware of the trade-offs and difficulties of actually doing it all together. I think a younger version of me would have been chock full of hubris and be like, startups, parenting, hard, impossible. And look, I don't fully believe that statement clearly, but a younger me would have actually said stuff like that. And I think actually it's that nothing's impossible. You just have to make trades, I think is the part of it. And I think we were very conscious of this because when we started, all three of us actually had younger kids. I think Phil's kids were a little bit older, but Dave and I's kids were about the same. And I think we actually said because we decided to want to do something together before we even came across Jellyfish and this engineering management space as a concept. We said, let's try to do something together. But we said, we have to make this work. And it was like a precondition. Like, we are all parents right now. We have lives on these things. We have families that we have to get there for a daycare pickup. We have to help cook dinner. We have to be home to support. And of course, we have partners that have been very supportive too, but also like we just have to make it work.
Does that work in a scaling startup that's raised a bunch? And I guess I'll ask the question, like, what about peacetime versus wartime? Because you don't control when the company's in wartime. And I'm not suggesting you're in wartime, but
no, I actually we're in wartime. I actually think they come in surges. Actually, so I actually want to tackle this. And look, I can retroactively look at it for us, and I can talk about ways to think about it, but I can't tell you how your business is, and nor can I tell you how this business is going to be a year from now. I think you make your best choices and thoughts and you react to the situation. I would say, look, though, I would separate the different phases of the business, right? I think like I was intellectually talking about the ideation stage. I'm talking about the 0 to 1 stage. I'm talking about, to your point, scaling now on this stuff, and they're all really different, right? I'm just saying at the ideation stage, we just said, hey, we are parents and family people at this point. There's no going back on that, right? But yet we want to do a startup together. So that was a reality of making the condition work. And to your point, like the point I'm trying to say is, I'm not saying it's impossible, nor am I saying it's like, of course it's going to work. You just have to make it work. And so for us, it was like acknowledging, look, B2B software sometimes has pacing that actually supports, because sales cycles are longer. You can rearrange time a little bit versus like you were living consumer stuff, which is it just surges in these like haphazard moments on these things. And so I'm just saying that there are certain kind of businesses that might be more conducive to reshifting time on this stuff. But to also, and look, acknowledging it's hard enough to get any company off the ground, adding more conditions is difficult. But also acknowledging like how your team and split was. Like, so we said, hey, as co-founders, we're all in the situation, but also like we just have to acknowledge it. So this means that, hey, we may not be able to, if you do daycare pickup, you can't be like at the office, like hammering from 6 to 9 and then hitting the bars right afterwards, right? Like maybe that was the early 20s thing. That's not going to work. And so acknowledging that's not going to work means like you make trade-offs. Say, what's the team you're going to actually hire? Are they going to be able to make progress without someone like sitting right next to them all the time? And acknowledging that, hey, while we have to go for daycare pickup and actually get dinner made, we can be back actually at the keyboard at 9 and doing things, and it just have a more regimented schedule, right? So there's going to have to be a work smarter, not just harder thing. And so look, these are all, they might sound trite, but like these things assemble together to being a plan. And I think step one is just being acknowledged, that part of it. Now, a couple of things. I would say that getting that 0 to 1 or getting that first thing off the ground is hard, right? Because I think like all of that is all of this whole journey is emotional, but that's very emotional because you're sitting there trying to figure out like, can you get this actually off the ground? And like somebody's got to will it. And it's a different form of wartime, but like till it's there, it's not there. And it's incredibly frustrating. And part of your brain goes like, if I could spend more hours here, could do these things, does it magically happen? And I'm just saying that's a psychological thing that's actually hard. I think once you actually start having some customers and some business and team, you can start making logical trades, being like, hey, when urgency kicks on, like everyone around you knows how to actually respond when there's a customer issue or a fundraising issue or selling like new software. And there's chances they can respond to the system. But for 0 to 1, you don't have that yet. And so it's really strength of your conviction and will to move it there. And I think that can be a very hard time for making the family trade-offs and all that part of it. And just like little hacks there, I think you can be honest with your family and build structures on that stuff. Hey, I'm going to need this. There are going to be nights that I need to be there. So like maybe I can schedule it with the family if that's helpful. Hey, like I do Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're going to do some networking stuff. Or Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're going to go out with the team and just put it on the calendar so everybody knows it's happening. But in exchange, I'll be there Monday nights and Wednesday nights to go do pickup and these things. Like I'm just saying it's not perfect, but realizing that sometimes it's the variability that actually causes family trade-offs versus the actual time. So just getting ahead of it, right? So these are like little nits. And then I actually think at scale, look, it's incredibly stressful, but I think things come in surges. And I think the good part is at a large level, you have a team, you can be clear around the challenges we all tackle together, but there are times you've got to dig in. But I think one of the good parts of a family that's watching your startup grow is they're empathetic and understand the structures of actually what's happening. And I'm lucky to have a supportive family that can do this, but like they kind of understand the pacing of the surges that we do need to dig in wartime. And there are times when other parts of the cycle, it gives us a little more flexibility. And I think the biggest thing for all parties involved is putting it out there as much as you can. If you've got family commitments you got to do, is put it on the calendar forward so the rest of the team knows how to work around you on that stuff. If you've got, so your family knows that, hey, like this part of the quarter works out this way. This when board meeting works out. My kids know when the board meetings are happening, right? They get it, right? And that's part of actually like just acknowledging that there are parts of the cycle that come and go and actually getting everybody ready for that stuff. Does that make sense at all?
It does, yeah. And I think some of it is just, I know if I think about my wife and I, the stressful time is not actually once something is in motion. It's not actually the thing that's going into motion. It's the uncertainty around before it's in motion and then all the what ifs. But then once it gets in motion, you just build systems around it and you adapt.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with if a family member gets sick or something. Like you don't wish it on anyone, but you adapt, right? And you just take the new normals as they come at you. And I think that's what you're saying is that yeah, it's stressful, but if you have systems and structures and plans and set expectations, et cetera, then you adapt. And it doesn't mean you won't have your moments, but like anything, you just build around the things that matter to you and you decide as a family, right, what matters to you.
And maybe I'm being naive, but I'm just saying I don't want it the other way. I don't want the formula to be, you can't do this with your family. No, I exist in this way and we're going to make it work. We're going to make this company screaming successful we're going to make our family system work on this thing. I just don't want to believe that it's impossible on that part of it. So that's my
Yeah,
story.
and speaking of possible or impossible, I think we're going to come back around later to
Yeah.
talk about how AI will change how we work and
Yeah.
live
Yeah.
directionally. But before we even talk about AI, let's talk about Jellyfish. So you said the Salesforce for engineering. What does that mean in practice?
Yeah, so we provide tools to help leadership, managers, and teams understand what people are working on, where they're stuck, and where they need help. So this could mean everything from like understanding what percentage of your team or product is like working on product A versus product B, or bug fixes versus new features, to like, hey, why is this team like stuck in the forecast of when this thing's going to finish slow? It's, oh, it turns out that this individual's not getting their pull requests actually supported, or this team's not getting the funding they actually need, or there's some real breakdowns in the SDLC, the software development lifecycle on this team. And so giving that kind of data-centric view in actually how the company can make decisions, how to make sure it's most effectively using its resources. And so the Salesforce analogy is a terrible one for product engineering folks, but it worked for business people because, look, when I was growing up in the 90s, professionally, there was no view in how sales works. And now we're metrics up the wazoo. And companies actually invest more in sales because they understand, oh, like we're stuck in the pipe. We're actually stuck on call one, or it's actually we're stuck in these conversions. And so by looking through Salesforce and the data there, the business, from the board to managers to the team members, can actually figure out, hey, where should we reallocate resources? Where should we do things to actually make sure we're doing? How can we forecast a few quarters out? How do we know what's healthy and actually working there? And so we make that trite analog being like, hey, we aim to provide that same kind of visibility and systems to the engineering management function, which has largely been like when I started, it was two of us nerds in the corner, but now it's actually the engine of companies, right? It is making the product that companies sell. It's 40% of OpEx and is the least understood of most of the functions in an organization. And so that's our ambition, to provide that visibility and understanding and insight to that department.
It's timely in that discussion I'm recording after yours is actually with the Day AI
Mm.
founders who
Oh,
are building kind of an AI version of CRM. And I guess my question is, in the CRM world, there's of course Salesforce as an incumbent, and I guess you could argue that that HubSpot is giving
yeah.
them a run for their money in some regards. What did the landscape look like on this side of the world? And does it also, from an acronym standpoint, does it have an acronym, the category that you're in?
Yeah, it's not quite yet. So the landscape is actually, look, I think the software engineering space came from a boutique creative, we're just making things. And so most of the innovation in the last 30 years has been actually for people making the code. And frankly, like the folks, the way they do it today is not the way I was trained. They're much better at it now. They cut me out of the code base accordingly on that. No, but I think that most of the tools have been for the actual engineers, and almost nothing's actually talking about how it engages with the business. And yeah, like most of the tools that you hear about, which is whether it's the source control things like GitHub, or the project management tools like Jira, like those are really built for the teams and almost nothing around how they tie to the business. And so our lens to this is, hey, how do we integrate that to the business of software engineering? How do we tie those all together? And so really thinking about how managers and leaders and the business tackle that. To your question on acronym, no, it has not gotten the quadrants of the waves yet on this stuff. One answer is I don't know what it's going to shake as, but I think they're playing around with software engineering intelligence. I think they're playing around with the words productivity, but I think when that acronym comes, it means that like we're finally getting there as an industry. If you look at the Salesforce analog, it probably took, Salesforce was built on the back of Siebel in the 90s. It wasn't probably until 2010, 2011 that we got de facto metrics that we ran by. So it was probably a 15-year journey in that evolution of that space before it became, of course, you need a CRM. And now we're talking about Salesforce, HubSpot. Now you're talking about Day. That's a 3-generation path. Siebel, that's a 4th generation in play there. So I think these things take a while to evolve, and we're looking forward to those acronyms coming forward in this space. And by the way, say hi to Christopher for me. He and I actually have kids the same age. I actually remember he and I really early on, we hung out with a couple other parents in a community center in the winter just because there's nowhere to go with the kids. I think the kids were like this small, like running around. So yeah, like he and I actually have parallel paths in that sense. So it's very cool that we're back to back here.
As a founder, if there's an acronym for the category that you're entering, is it too late?
No, I think your playbook's just different, right? I think it depends what you're playing. Like whether you like greenfield spaces or or what are they, the blue ocean or red ocean kind of things. It depends what you're looking for. I think if you're if there's acronyms in play, then you're probably walking into a dogfight situation. It's probably a fast follower game. It probably means there's going to be limited product differentiation, and it's going to be more about how you attack the market and go fast there. I think in pre-acronym worlds, I think you're defining the space, and the struggles there are much more making sure that people care. You are actually, they don't show up with budgets, and you're actually elbowing out and probably replacing hand-driven processes. So it gives you room for creativity, but like they may not have time for you in that space, and maybe people don't care, right? So I think they're just different fights. It depends what fight you want to go into and what you're suited for.
When you think historically, so it's been, call it 9 years or so since you started. If you were writing the Jellyfish book, what do you think the key chapters would be thus far in the story?
Oh man. Um, I think like it'd be an exciting book. I like so one, I don't think we're ready to write a book because as founder journeys are you're always paranoid around what's coming around the corner. I don't think you get to go do that till the later chapters are written. So paranoid of that. I think there's so many chapters of this stuff. So one could be, I think I would like look, it's been such a crazy last 5 years. I think I would do it around chapter one is getting the band back together. Chapter two is and deciding what to go do. I think the first couple years were just like that early crew of the first 10, 15 of us, 20 of us, just like making something out of nothing. And then, and
So,
you,
and that time was it spent building and experimenting, or was it spent under like market research and development?
no, I think it was about building air quote alphas with our first kind of 20 customers aren't even the right word, but alpha partners that are willing to work with us to develop stuff, to figure out if they give a crap about what we're actually making. And I think all those people willing to do it with us and all the interviews we did. But yeah, the first couple of years are just making something out. And I would actually argue that it could be incredibly frustrating for people. You want that to run. You read blogs all day about how these companies are taking off and yours isn't yet. And it doesn't matter if you will it, and you got the pressure of the team and investors and all that stuff, and you're trying to make something happen. And then I think you could actually write it around the phases of the crazy world. COVID hits, and then like we get the trend that the movement to work from home and hybrid suddenly catalyzed us to be relevant in that moment. You
And
could also say
what was it about that moment
so. Look, 2019 we were already starting to sell, but these are all a lot of small numbers, first 20 customers kind of stuff, and then you get into COVID, and I think Q3 2020, I think we did more in 1 month than all of 2019, and the product hadn't magically changed, or really the marketing bones. It was really the world changed. Everybody went from, oh, I know what everybody's doing, to all of a sudden everyone's going, oh my God, I can't walk the floor anymore. I can't see anybody. Are folks okay? Are they happier? Are they working faster? Are they working slower? I mean, there was that traits of people working 2 jobs, they're working 0 jobs. Like it was all, everyone's, I don't know what's going on. And people suddenly needed visibility into what's happening. Just basic stuff you got from used to be like at the water cooler. You just didn't have it anymore. And so that was a catalyst moment. And then I think then there was the crazy go-go 2021, like the hyperbole of that time period. And that was crazy. And then you've got the challenges of kind of the tech recession of 23, which actually meant that companies suddenly cared about efficiency and productivity, that because they needed their companies to survive and thrive in a scarce budget world. And that meant that relevance in that space. And so that's another transition for the company and business and these things. And then we've got transitions again right now that we're starting to see around like this shift to AI and all of these things. And then you've got like the tumult of the financial markets along the way. Surprise SVB. A funny family story. My 10-year-old strangely asks me about the SVB stuff all the time. Why? Because I don't think she fully processed it all, but she remembers. We're sitting there in COVID time, and I'm like in like hair on fire, resolving the crisis of, oh my God, the bank's crashing, right? And she like knows it because it was just like all of a sudden we're all around because COVID kind of work from home time, but it was like around in a weird crisis way. And so that's like I really don't think she knows what it means, but she asks about his SVB like thing randomly all the time because it's a moniker that's seared in her brain in that space, which is weird kind of parental crisis handling stuff, right, on that stuff. So I think these are all like, I think it would be, look, I don't think we're ready to actually to write the book, but to your question, I think there's like all of these interesting chapters that appeared that have been like really dynamic and like the world's been going lock to lock constantly on these things. It's been like, I think it's been hard for everybody.
If you over that time, so since kind of 19 or 20 when you were serving customers in
Yeah.
earnest to today, how has who you've served evolved? How has what you're doing for them evolved, and how has how you go to market evolved
Oh man.
during this
Okay.
era?
Geez, these are good questions, man.
I'm just
Uh,
curious. That's why I do the show.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like these are
yeah.
things I really want to learn.
Look,
Yeah.
we early on, like we started this, which is we said we knew we wanted to focus on engineering leaders because we had gone through the journey ourselves. All three of us grew up as engineering and product leaders. We knew the pains. A lot of our community was in that area. So we originally, like many startups, you even used the word earlier when we were talking around founder market fit, like we probably had that kind of in market intelligence. We had lived in that space. So a lot of our network were those people. So our early customer development calls, our early alpha partners were people that we connected with and we knew. And I think like early on, like even we're mealing around in 17, 18, we thought we probably were working more towards smaller customers, so around startups and stuff like that. Again, and we quickly learned through that journey that like, look, when you got a team of 10 people around the table, you know what everybody's doing. And not only that, you're not under kind of zero sum financial pressure around making trade-offs. You're not getting ridden for efficiency. You're getting ridden to be relevant. And while we add value there, that wasn't going to be a good like way that we were going to like really provide value and kind of innovate in that space. And so we quickly realized we need to go to larger companies, and that meant kind of VC round kind of companies. So that kind of shaped things. So think north of 40 engineers, kind of stuff like that. I'm hand waving here. I think from a go-to-market perspective, we've always known we actually wanted a kind of mid-market motion. And what we mean by that is like, this is a founder comment. Look, when we were growing up, it used to be if you're selling south of 100K deals, the math wasn't going to work to have professional sellers. And so you could have like credit card things, like sub 10K things, if they were swiping credit cards. And then you could have north of 100K send sellers in the field stuff. And so we actually decided we actually wanted neither because we felt that the value proposition we were innovating for was not going to be a credit card swipe. It's going to be teams at scale, which meant going through sometimes more complicated sales cycles, which means you just couldn't do it on a credit card. I can't swipe a credit card for north of 10K kind of stuff. And then maybe you can. But then we also felt like we didn't want to be doing really big enterprise sales from the beginning because we had lived the life before when you're selling these high 6, 7 figure deals. Not that it's easy, but if you do, the sales cycles take enormous time periods, years on the stuff. But all that at those dollar values, you're building a lot of custom stuff for buyers. And from a product perspective, it's possible that you degrade into a lot of custom work that's not repeatable. And so we actually made a decision that we really wanted to be selling a mid-market price points, which is when I was growing, they used to be called the Valley of Death because you couldn't fund a sales guy for it. But I think post in this kind of Zoom generation, I think you can, and it turns out our buyers, which are engineering leaders, don't always want to have people visiting the office. And it actually worked in this COVID time period.
So you have
where
Salesforce, but it's an inside sales model.
it's an inside sales force selling kind of 5, 6 figure kind of price points in that space. And that was novel in 17. And because in 17, everybody was selling PLG bottoms up self-service things. And we're a little contrarian. And we just felt like that our value proposition, the place we wanted to innovate for, was not well serviced by self-service things. We needed to evangelize. We needed to get out there and meet folks that weren't just like out there shopping online. They needed to be sold to in that space and talked to and reached out and listened to. And so that meant that it was going to be a top-down selling motion, but a remote one on that space. And so anyways, we willed that existence on there. We willed it by bringing in BDR STRs first to actually help us call into those spaces and a lot of early founder selling and then supplementing that with sellers once we figured out some motion stuff. And then the last part of the journey is, I think in the last few years, we've been going up market in the space, and we're now privileged to get to work with public software companies in that space where the deals get to be bigger on that space and that we actually have a larger plethora of constituency on the buying side. But I do think, though, as a founder, it doesn't mean it's going to work. You have to choose where you want to play, both in where the value proposition, who you want to listen to, and what price point. It doesn't mean it's going to work, right? But you have to be somewhat intentional because the market can pull you and investors and team members can yank you in one way or the other, and you may choose that you don't want to go there. Doesn't mean where you want to go will work, but I think you have to have an opinion because I think motion and how you listen to does have hand-to-hand influence on product and go to market. They don't live in a vacuum. They go back and forth in that stuff.
So when it comes to AI, when did you first start seeing AI seep into how your customers were
Oh yeah.
utilizing it? How's that evolved? And then same question for your internal operations, either on the product side or go to market or both.
Oh, so many layers here, man. So look, I think we have all been reading about all the stuff in AI for a couple years now. And I use the word couple rounding in that space. But I think we started really seeing this in earnest from our customers this would have been, let's see, this is kind of mid 23,
Mm-hmm.
right? Mid spring, like mid 23, our customers started saying, hey, we're really a bull on all these coding assistant stuff, but we don't know if it's like we're getting the yield for our ambition and for our yield for all the dollars we have here. And we don't know why. Can you help us figure this out? And so we're already working with them. Said, sure, let's do cohort A versus cohort B. They're using it and they're not. And let's juxtapose these things. And we got a chance to work with a few folks, and we did a couple of talks to get around some insights around giving back to them around like what was happening in this team from a metrics and change perspective, what was happening in this team. And then we did some bespoke studies for a couple of them. We did a couple of talks and papers on that stuff. And then we got a chance to work with the folks at GitHub. And then we said, hey, we have a hard time kind of understanding who's using it. And so they worked with them and they got us an API to give us some telemetry of what people are doing, who's engaging with these tools. We don't actually have the cohort A or cohort B. And it's been really powerful for us to get a chance to launch this feature. So we launched it mid-year last year, and we now have around like 300 customers that are actually like engaged, where we actually have day-by-day fidelity of the engineers engaging with these tools. And then actually furthermore, like then because we're working with them on the rest of the platform, we actually get to see the outcomes. We get to see what's changing in the speed and what code is working. Are they doing more roadmap or less bugs? And what's actually changing behaviorally? What kind of teams, what kind of projects? And it's a really neat corpus. And then now we've actually layered in other coding tools too. And so we actually have this juxtaposition where you can actually see which kinds of tools are working, which kind of projects, what's actually happening, what the adoption curves look like, and all of these things. And so it's a really neat and insightful data set where it's not just usage, it's usage correlated with the projects that they're using and the organizational structures and teams and tools, and then also then correlated with outcomes and what's actually happening there. So it's been a really neat study to actually watch it move through, I think, kind of 9 months of journey on that stuff. So yeah, that has been the basis of why we've been able to make some really neat observations there. And you mentioned earlier, we've been actually able to publish a bit around that stuff. And there's more jewels to dig out of there. We're just still learning more as we actually do this.
In a minute, I want to switch to how you're leveraging it internally. But before
Yeah.
we do, I'd love to understand, double click on what you just said. So how much is it helping? Is there consistency across the clients that you're observing? And yeah, like what are the big takeaways from what you've been seeing so far?
Also, I actually think there's like multiple layers. I think there's like different companies at different sizes and scales. There's different kinds of tools being used and all of these things. And in some ways, I think all the vignettes are true, right? So on one hand, you hear from the Valley around these new startups that are actually getting a ton of leverage from these tools like Cursor and stuff like that are like amazing. Like I play with those that are really cool, right? Like I think Chris is gonna go off about this. He loves it. And I've talked to him about it. Like where they are getting a chance to reshape their team and they're building this net new code. And in some ways, they're building their MVPs and prototypes and those early things really fast, right? Because they can work with these tools and orchestrate it in that way. And so I think there is some truth around that stuff that's actually happening. It's really neat, right? At the same time, we also get a chance to look at and work with companies that are at scale, that are going from be around to public, that have hundreds and thousands of engineers implementing these tools writ mass. Those companies are also seeing different things too. Like they're seeing yield too, but it's actually like the micro vignettes on this stuff is like they are not like working with half their team sizes. They still have all their teams. They have not made trade-off decisions on this stuff, but they're seeing 10 to 20% lifts in any number of metrics you want to cut it by. You could cut it by the cycle time, how things are actually moving. You could cut it by the throughput of PRs moving through the system better. But in mass, in aggregate, they are seeing lift, but it's on the order of kind of 10 to 20% on that stuff. And also you're seeing interesting adoption things where despite rolling this stuff out, they're actually getting only adoption of the kind of usage of 60 something percent, 2/3 of the team using it on a regular basis, and you could probably even get more out of it. And so my takeaway on this very coarsely is that like we are on a transitional journey, right? So I'm a bull. I'm using these tools myself, and I think they're really powerful, right? At the same time, companies at scale are living with an existing code base they've already sold. These tools are not as much accelerators and when they're not doing net new. I think there's value there because so much of the engineering time is around not just the coding, it's all the other stuff they're doing. Some studies say that like hands on keyboard are only 10% of some people's time. Furthermore, the work they're doing is around micro editing, nudging, changing more than net new. And then there's also this whole discussion, which is it's just like these teams and organizations need training and enablement and adoption and goals and telemetry and measurement, which is where we're helping them with this stuff. And the team that's using it doesn't really know how to use it and when. And so that's why the adoption rates and utility there. So despite it actually seeming like not a full yield set of numbers, I'm actually a bull even in that setting because it's the unexciting stuff, training, enablement, goals. Like you could just do those things and then you'll get more yield out of it. And so I'm actually really a bull for this whole thing because so much is changing so fast, right? And so like the innovative part of my brain is like, this is so freaking cool. And I'm also excited because the things we're looking at today in IDE, that's only like generation inning 2 of this stuff. There's next inning, there's gonna be all different kinds of tools, agentic systems, and all different parts of the SDLC and other parts of the day that we're talking about and how those things actually fit in and how those things actually work. And then I'm excited also because when those appear, these companies at scale won't know how to actually use them exactly. They need help with telemetry, understanding how to apply them, and that's where we can bring them value, and then they'll start seeing some yields too. I'm excited for the transformation our industry actually has to because the teams as they look today won't look like this in the future too, and so we've got to figure that out together, and so you got to keep your hands close on those things. So I think it's a really exciting time for that part of it, and so yeah, I'm a bull. But I think that's like the juxtaposition of the telemetry and pragmatism, what I see today, and what we need to do to get there in the future on this stuff.
So what then are the implications in terms on how much you are choosing to push the envelope with these tools internally?
Look, I would say this for all organizations. I think the team of the future, when you squint forward, is I'm actually not a person who believes it's going to be 100% robots, nor am I a person that believes it's 100% all humans in exactly the configuration we are today. I think the team of the future, again, is going to be half and half like AI stuff and humans on this stuff. And that means the interaction and role on that stuff is really going to be different. I don't think any of us can like really know what that's going to look like. And I'm just coming out from a first principles perspective that I don't believe in either of the limit conditions right now. And so I think it's somewhere in between. I think the journey of arriving there, though, is going to be through trial and error and telemetry. We need to be in there and actually seeing it. So like on our team, we're using all the tools, right? Like we actually feel like which flavor? We use all the flavors. Why? Because our customers are using all the flavors, right? We have to try all the flavors to do it. Now, we also are a software company, so we have to do this in a secure InfoSec like way. And so we actually have to make sure that we are doing it in a way that is judicious for our customers and that we're not leaking data in this way. And so we actually have to also spend on actually making sure that we InfoSec and actually are hosting it appropriately, are using the right versions of these things. And so we are actually balancing all of this stuff. We are pushing the teams to constantly try all the new flavors, things when we can on this stuff, because we want to blaze the trail for our customers. And where the blazing isn't just the 6-person new school company, it's also a blazing, hey, we're a real company with real employees that has to make these trade-offs. We're actually living the journey that our customers have to live more than like some new 4-person startup. Our customers are companies at scale. And so we push our companies our team to challenge the status quo of how to do this because we need to. And that means figuring out like, hey, how are we using these tools internally? How do we tie into these tools? How do we get yield and leverage of this stuff? What's working, what's not for us? What's the telemetry to know that's working or not? Let's dog food it. But then also like, how do we provide differentiating features for our customers so that we can actually capture this moment? How do we think about this critically in an existence-proof way? So like in a 50-50 AI way, like how do we exist in the future in that way? I think you have to keep asking those questions at all 3 layers on a regular basis because the stuff is just changing so darn fast on this stuff. I think if you're asleep at the wheel, I think it'll pass us all by.
Some of the companies I've had on the show have strategies where they might have a SaaS model themselves, but they target companies with dozens of SaaS point tools that they're paying for. And through a combination of AI and open source, they enable consolidating into a single SaaS subscription and then ripping out, in some cases, several, if not dozens of tools. Mark Andreessen famously wrote several years back about how software is eating the world. I guess
Yeah.
my question is AI and open source eating software?
Ooh, interesting. You're making a markets question. Does AI eat?
And I guess you could take that a step further and say, do you worry about that as it relates to someone doing that in your category?
I think, look, that's just general disruption. Are you going to be disrupted? And I think
Mhm.
you should be critically asking yourself that, because if you're not, you're asleep at the wheel. I think that is founder fear and paranoia. You should always be paranoid of that stuff. Look, we're still running, so I think we need to actually we have to try to disrupt ourselves and out innovate ourselves in that stuff. I think, look, open source, does it actually eat? I think that, yes, I think there will be disruptions in point solutions in that way. I think we're privileged at a place where I don't believe that engineers will disappear entirely. I think R&D functions will still exist. I'm a bull for that part of it. And so for us, it's about playing into that arc of that transition for us. Because look, if I thought engineers wouldn't exist, yeah, we should be doing something different. I don't believe that. I think we will. And I think we're here to actually manage through that transition. But I think you should critically look at that on a regular basis. But I think there will be change. I think it'd be naive to think that there won't be change on those things. But it's about where you play in the market. Actually, I was on a panel recently, and someone asked, hey, with all these startups making all this AI stuff, what does that mean for startups in general? And I actually think I thought about it for a second, and I was like, this was actually the same argument. If you remember in the Web 2 phrase, we're like, oh my God, look, with Web 2 and cloud software, you can start a startup for a couple $100,000. And so like VCs and the whole ecosystem is going to be upended. This is the end. What did you and I lived through that? What did we learn? We learned that no, startups did not end. It actually meant something different, which is it meant that every startup could get going for a couple $100,000 to build a prototype. But the problem was that meant that actually just generated inflation, which meant it needed more differentiation. It became really hard to differentiate against the next guy. Because it used to be, like in the early aughts, if you made something, oh my God, that must have cost you $10 million, and now it costs you a couple $100,000. It turns out everyone can make something. So you actually needed to make something better. You needed to market better. And it turned out then the talent war actually came about, and you started needing to raise 10 million again on that stuff. So I actually think yes, every company in YC can actually do this with 2 people, not 4, and they're building more stuff. But that means that all of them are running too. And so I actually think, though, like the making might have gotten easier, but differentiation might have gotten harder. And actually proving value to customers got harder. So it actually means that you have to listen harder, right? And as a founder, your role just is listen, and retuning and shaping just got more important. So no, I don't think it's the end of VC. I don't think it's the end of startups. I don't think it's the end of these things. But yeah, things accelerate, things shift, the ball moves. You have to provide value harder. You have to listen to your customers harder. You have to innovate harder. But the innovation may not be stuck in just the coding part of it. It's around iteration, refinement, listening, building that, getting to that product market fit part of it. I don't know. I just feel it's the same echo conversation we're having in that Web 2 phrase. I don't know if that connects with you, but that lit up in my brain when someone asked this question the other day.
No, it does. I think it's just sorting through. It's okay, these changes will be profound, but then anytime this is killed, that's killed, this thing's over, it's like, inevitably, it's almost always overblown, and then the truth is somewhere in the middle. One thing that makes me wonder, though, is if you were starting Jellyfish today, what do you think the implications would be in terms of the humans required and the funding required to get to where you are? Would you like, and I guess said another way, should growth investors be scared because companies can be so much more capital efficient?
Look, I don't know, right? But I would say, like, inevitably, yeah, the playbook changes, right? Look, back to my Web 2 analogy, like you start up then, yes, you'd build on Heroku or you'd build in AWS, and you'd actually be doing a different stack, and like the developers would be different. So sure, if you compared a company from early aughts to the 2010s, would they be different companies? Yeah, they'd be different companies, right? The who you hired and the sequencing is different. Inevitably, though, to get to scale, you still needed the same amount of capital across both of those things. So maybe the capital shifts a little bit. And look at all the companies today in the AI space, they're raising more. So maybe it's not even about less, it's more. So yeah, like I think things adapt. I think the skill sets change and who you hire. So it'd be naive to think that you'd hire the same people from 20 years ago. And then on the flip side, like capital sequencing, yeah, I think capital sequencing is going to change, and it'll change again in 3 years too, man. It always does. So yes, things change. Does it mean existential for parties? No, I think the markets adapt, and like we still trudge on. So yeah, like I'm looking at you doing this, building it in the open, and I think it is an exciting time. So you get to look a little bit to the future and start differently, which is really cool. And as parents, you can say it too. I was just joking with someone like, look, my kids are 10 and 12. Like, I think it's okay. Like we can see a little bit towards the horizon and be like, hey, the job's going to be different. So we get the chance as parents to tune them a little bit about a little more of this, a little of that. Not that we have any control with it, but they get to be aware of what they're actually playing into. So yeah, a little luxury in timing on that one. You can't control timing. That's what luck means in founder talk.
I know we're almost running up on time to, I guess, move towards wrapping up. When you think about the future, if Jellyfish is successful to your wildest ambition
to be like you,
yeah. Oh yeah, a full-time podcaster with no business model. But yeah, what does Jellyfish look like at that time, and what have you achieved?
Look, I don't like to put my brain in that space, because back to my earlier point, we always should be paranoid. That is the founder journey, and that means that we don't get to take victories along the way very well. But that is the founder journey. I think, look, I think I've said it before, but I think I care most about is actually making a dent in the world. And I think for me, the dent lands in two places. One, you make a dent in our customers and industry that hey, what we did helped them do their jobs better and differently than they were doing before. And like that is it. And that what we do lives on. And I think that is an important dent to make. And the other dent is in the lives of the team. Like I hope that the team gets to look back and go, hey, that was a magical time. And they all get to do things together in 20 years. I was clear beneficiary of the diaspora of a company called Indeka's success that spawned off many companies like across the country that have gotten to amazing successes, but also that I get to actually work with the same crew, the folks that hired me 25 years ago. That's freaking awesome. And I hope that I can make a dent in my team's fest where they get to have that conversation in 20 years. Too, in their own way. I hope they go crush it.
I like that. It's like a local versus global. It's so many people's answers are like, we've solved global poverty, or right. It's like I met with an old Runkeeper colleague the other day, and one of the things that she mentioned was just that the tribe of people that worked there at that time, they're super tight beyond any place she's ever worked since. And that's really meaningful, right? It's not a financial it's not a fun return or whatever, but it does mean something, and it shouldn't be poo-pooed. It's hard to do.
Yeah, look, if I am successful at those two things, then the other things actually happen to correlate, right? If you make a product dent in the world, you're generating some returns for somebody. Like that, simple as that, right?
And then I'll just give you a chance for an advertisement. If there's anyone you want to hear from, either if you've got key roles you're hiring for or certain customer profile, or even just parting words you want to impart with listeners.
So most folks listening here, you probably are wishing for a bit more innovation and a bit more yield for your scarce budget from your software R&D team. Please talk. And also folks that are trying all these AI tools and really into them, but maybe not seeing the full yield that you wish you got out of it. Let's trade notes. We got some tips we can help you get from here to there.
Great. And how should people get in touch with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, you can find me on X, and you can mail me at amlau@jellyfish.co.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate you making the time. I'll continue to be cheering you on, making the Boston ecosystem proud, and yeah, let's keep in touch.
Word. Thank you so much for having me here, man. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to The Next. If you enjoyed it, you can subscribe from your favorite podcast player. In addition to the podcast, which typically publishes weekly, there's also a weekly newsletter on Substack at thenextnext.substack.com. That's essentially for weekly accountability of the ground I'm covering, areas I'm tackling next, and where I could use some help as well. And it's a great area to foster discussion and dialogue around the topics that we cover on the show. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.